It took us a full year to figure out the best teams that World of Warcraft has to offer. They played through their entire season trying to grab as many points as possible, and they've already gone head-to-head in 2 lands this year, but the entire time there was one goal on their mind, and it was to make it here to this main stage, to take their shot at being the world champion. My name is Rich, and I get to cover all of the action with Zico, Supatis, and Venruki, and we need to actually talk about the stakes here before we even get into anything else. Talk about anything that happened this year. We got to talk about the prize pool. $330,000 on the line. First place, going to get the king share, over $140,000 of that prize. But Venruki is somebody who has competed in this tournament. I think you can talk about the fact that it goes a little bit bigger than the money here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the money is really important. It certainly helps, but at the end of the day, for World of Warcraft, especially in PvP, winning BlizzCon is kind of the end game, and it's what all these PvP players kind of strive to do. A lot of them have been doing it for many, many years, and this could finally be their year.
And also now there's a little bit of an opening. I mean, both of our grand finalists from last year not going to be competing in the tournament, so we are definitely going to see somebody new actually manage to get that win this year. We need to also take a look at some of the stuff that went down off broadcast. Some games have already been played, and that's going to lead the way for a pretty crazy day today as we do jump in right now to our first series that happened off broadcast, Unitas Blue versus Cloud9. C9 going to be able to clean it up relatively quickly here with the 3-0. I do want you guys to pay attention, though, as we look at these moments to Unitas, Zico, because we're going to be looking at both of these squads, Unitas White and Unitas Blue, early in the day.
Yeah, Unitas White and Unitas Blue representing APAC and LATAM, of course. And, you know, Unitas Blue, I gotta say, I've been a big fan of these guys. They play very aggressive comps, you know, with the Rogue Mage Paladin. They play the Shadow Priest Rogue as well, and they kind of remind me a little bit of ASUSTek from Europe. So I like these guys a lot, and nobody can really be counted out here.
You know, I also would say nobody can be counted out here. You might notice on your screen right now, folks, as we watch this recap, Team Medicine able to actually take a game off of one of the most dominant teams throughout the year.
Well, I think Method Black and Cloud9, we can call them the god teams of 2019, and in this tournament in particular so far, we've seen that the gods can bleed. Cloud9 is actually in the lower bracket. That was an unbelievable comeback that we saw from Wildcard. Their Fire Mage Arms Warrior Mistweaver worked out for them so excellently. This was a nail-biter series. It had potential for cross kills throughout multiple games. In this one particular, it did end up going down to a 2 versus 2. Cloud9 were on match point. They were facing going down to lower bracket, but Snuts and Cubsy pulled it off to defeat the 3 players of Wildcard Gaming in the final moments.
Yeah, and you need to keep in mind, I mean, Wildcard Gaming did the impossible. They sent Cloud9 to the lower bracket, but Cloud9, they were starting to pick up momentum in this series. It was a really close Game 5. However, Cloud9 in the lower bracket, and that means Wildcard Gaming still has their spot in the upper.
Yeah, we're going to be watching the last one here. That was Method Black versus the Gosu crew. And this results in one of the craziest days of BlizzCon that I think we've ever experienced. We are going to see nothing but elimination series throughout the entire day except for that upper final, right? That's going to be the only place where we see any wiggle room for these teams. And on your screen right now, in case you're just tuning in, I want you to be able to see all of the results of those offline matches, and you can kind of keep that in your mind as we do get to look at the bracket, see where all the chips have fallen, and then dive right into all these elimination series to start off the day. And Zico, I like to always ask you this one. If we look at this bracket right now, what teams are jumping off the page to you? Which matchups are you most excited for?
I'm excited to see what Cloud9 can do in the lower bracket. I think they're a shark down there, and you know, I've been watching a little bit of war games in you know, the practice area. I gotta say, ASUSTek versus Cloud9, those Rogue Mage Druid mirrors it came down to. Cloud9 has been looking better in those games, so I think Cloud9 can really farm their way back up here. So I'm excited to see if they can do that.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I bumped into Snuts. I was actually standing with Venruki. You know, we were hanging out after last night at BlizzCon, and I was like, "Who are you playing in the upper final?" I just kind of assumed, because I was going back to my hotel room because last night we had to crown another champion here for the MDI. Congratulations to Method EU. So I went back before I watched the matches. I bumped into Snuts and I was like, who's going to be able to actually play you? And it's like, wait, he's in the lower side of this? And that's going to make for a crazy, crazy set of matches today. And the first matchup, of course, going to be Unitas versus Unitas, Unitas White versus Unitas Blue. Supatis, for anybody who isn't as familiar with these teams, what do they have in store for us?
Well, they're returning champions from 2018 moving into 2019. They're both coming in with the goals of making it past top 4, but only one of them can do it now because they're going to be going head-to-head in the first round. They're both playing compositions that aren't particularly meta compositions. The Rogue Mage Paladin, it's pretty strong on ladder, but we've seen Rogue Mage Druid kind of rise to the dominance in terms of the Rogue Mage potential. And Rogue Mage Paladin versus Unitas White, who typically are playing Retribution Paladins. We saw Fresh really dominate on it. He hasn't been able to utilize it too effectively at the BlizzCon stage. He's kind of feeling a little bit nervous because he has to rely on his other teammates to be able to carry the day. They've adapted well. Oxygen comes into this tournament, having improved and diversified his healer pool. He's now not only a Discipline Priest, he's brought in a very strong Restoration Druid, and what I'm anticipating is a Warrior Mage Druid from them in Game 1.
This happens just about every BlizzCon. I feel like we get to the main stage, we feel like the meta is relatively in place, and then some weird stuff just ends up happening, whether it is the teams actually coming from different regions or if it's just an adaptation before you get to the main stage, trying to find something to pull out a victory. But we're going to throw it down to the floor right now and see if I has heard anything about what these players are going to be playing today.
Thank you, Rich. I spoke with Fresh of Unitas White this morning, and I asked him how he was feeling, and he said even though he was a little bit, maybe slightly nervous about his matches this morning, he says this is a team that is very strong on their mains, and they still are going to be confident going into these games. I also spoke with Unitas Blue, and I asked them, you know, maybe people think you're a bit of an underdog, but they said don't underestimate us. We're the best in our region, and the meta favors us. So I'm definitely excited to see if these teams can prove their worth, Rich.
I'm very excited to as well. I think this is always one of the fun things too for anybody who has mostly been watching the NA Cups or the EU Cups. You actually get that moment at BlizzCon to see who the best in the world is.
I mean, that's like you said, a lot of what we've seen throughout the year has been mostly North America as well as the European regions. Now we have a chance to see the LATAM as well as the Asian Pacific. So it should be interesting to see what these two teams have to offer. I mean, we have to keep in mind both of these rosters qualified for BlizzCon last year, so they really are the best in their particular region.
They're absolutely dominant in the region. I also think that's one of the reasons, Zico, that you do have that potential to see things that we consider outside of the meta. It's because they are playing against a completely different pool of talent.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the interesting thing about BlizzCon. You always get to see kind of how the different regions clash and which style and which meta is actually the better one. And looking at APAC, they played BM Hunter Arcane Mage. We might see that and how that would do against something like the Mage Lock Druid. And you can't really count these comps out because you haven't actually gotten practice against it, and you're playing against the best of that style. So. Yeah. It's going to be nice to see.
I have a lot of practice. I consider myself a BM hunter at heart. When you two weren't on the desk for the last cup, I actually experienced some separation anxiety.
Oh,
okay.
We missed you too, Rich.
Calm down.
Love you guys.
We love you too, Rich.
Sid, when we look at this matchup, though, I know that you've been big fans of both of these regions. You've gotten to cover everything that's happened in these regions throughout the years. What do you think about this particular matchup? Because we're going straight into it. BlizzCon, I hope you're ready to get this day started. The first matchup is going to be Unitas Blue versus Unitas White. We're going to be kicking it off, as we always do, in a Grand Arena blind pick. Let's see what they have in store.
The pressure is at its highest here in 2019 as we will be concluding the Arena World Championship Series. Only one team will remain by the end of the day. Unitas White look to go head-to-head with Unitas Blue, both the best teams from their respective regions. But this is a bit of a composition rematch for Unitas White as they qualified from the APAC region. They had to defeat Team Gameface, who was running the exact same composition that Unitas Blue are running. And that was a nail-biter. They had to reverse sweep 4 games in a row to qualify. If Unitas Blue is better than Gameface, perhaps Unitas White will not be able to outdo them.
Yeah, this is a composition we know Unitas Blue can play, and they play it really, really well, so we'll have to see exactly what happens. Early on, it looks like crowd control in favor of Unitas White as they look to make a setup onto Josito, but Josito doing a good job deflecting early on. Taking actually a decent amount of damage. Shadow forced to trade out his Gladiator's Medallion in order to keep Josito alive. Popping out the combustion. Decent damage now over onto CMD as they look to reverse the pressure.
All right, let's see if they can get some damage out here. Oxygen denying the kill with Ironbark. CMD likely to recover. Yask tearing into Josito. Shadow trying to recover with his Avenging Wrath active. His healing will be increased quite heavily, but Josito Jones is cycloned at low health. Well done by Oxygen. Single-handedly crowd controlling the team. Aiden manages to break it up, but he can't deny CMD. Ring of Frost has been landed, and the Avenging Wrath is getting very little value for Shadow as Josito is in a ton of trouble. Temporal Shield ticking away, and he manages to barely recover by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah, nicely done by Josito. Good defensive play. CMD now a little bit on the back foot. As you can see, Aiden is really ripping in. He denies him with the Dragon's Breath into his sheep, but unfortunately isn't able to find it. Now CMD, he's in a lot of trouble. He's getting lower oxygen, has to hold on a little bit longer for that Iron Bark. If he can connect that, I think CMD is going to be okay. But in the meantime, Zito also in a very dangerous range. He did manage to hold on to that Cauterize, which is really important.
That was the hand of sacrifice from Shadow, trading one of his defensive cooldowns to save his partner. Yosk now being swapped to for a moment. Unitas Blue trying to catch Unitas White off guard, but you are not catching Yosk off guard as he continues the assault. Blade storming towards Josito, setting up for crowd control. CMD with follow-up. Shadow will be removed from the game for quite some time as Aiden is now cycloned. It's 3 versus 1 for a few moments onto Josito. Yosk tearing in, pummeling the poly. Sharpened Blade active, cutting into Josito as we see Oxygen setting up Cyclone after Cyclone into a bash. Will that be enough to get the Cauterize from Josito? That is the main cooldown they're looking for. They're pushing for it. Will they find it? Blessing Protection denies it for now as CMD looks to try and remove it as quickly as possible. Now Oxygen in crowd control and Unitas Blue look to counterattack.
Yeah, Unitas Blue, they're looking to get aggressive. Polymorph and Oxygen, but that Relentless pays dividends, allowing him to connect the Iron Bark, and now CMD should ultimately survive, popping his combustion, getting a lot of damage rolling onto Josito. Is around 50% health right now. Gladiator's Medallion trades up by Shadow, but he gets polymorphed onto Josito in a lot of trouble. Forced to trade out his Ice Block, and that is huge for Unitas White.
Big flex by Unitas White. They're significantly ahead on cooldowns. They may just be able to close it out. Unitas Blue, they're desperate. They're going for the all-in on Oxygen. They know they are so far behind, it may be unrecoverable if they cannot net a kill here on Oxygen soon. Aiden cutting through. Can he single-handedly take down Oxygen? Oxygen bashes Aiden away. Aiden trinkets for the kill. Oxygen jumps, but will it be a safety jump? Aiden in pursuit. Aggressive Blessing Protection. They are all in on Oxygen. This has to work for them. He holds on at 1%. It has to work. Will he go down here at 1%? Oxygen fully stunned, and the all-in is going to work. Unitas Blue were so far behind, but they pull it off with all-out aggression.
Good morning, BlizzCon. What a way to start off our day. A beautiful, beautiful play onto Oxygen. Let's talk about how that can even happen, Zico, because there was so much pressure on Josito Jones throughout the entirety of that matchup.
Yeah, Josito Jones was really far behind. We saw some nice plays from CMD. He got polymorphs on Shadow. He polymorphed his Trinket. They forced out the Ice Block, and they realized, hey, we're losing the mage race. You know, both Warrior and Rogue trying to take down each mage. And then, of course, we see that we can actually see it right here, and this is the kind of moment I was talking about. Shadow trinkets and gets immediately repolyed on his Trinket right there before he can do anything. So Josito Jones has to use his Ice Block, and of course at this point they're so far behind, they realize we're not gonna kill CMD here, so we're gonna go for a Druid all-in strategy. They do a nice swap here to Oxygen, and Oxygen, he really can't really recover. This Dragon's Breath that they did there, so nice there from CMD, following it up with the Nova, but the Blessing of Protection, the Blessing of Freedom, you know, all of those Holy Paladin utilities, as well as the damage from the Holy Paladin, is just not enough.
We saw Shadow for the first time last year on the stage, and a couple of the first games he looked shaky, but as soon as he got through that, he put up quite a fight against Method Black last year. Now coming into his second BlizzCon in 2019, that was a solid game. Any other Paladins thinking, we've lost, you have no Ice Block, I have no more Hands of Sacrifice, no more Hands of Protection, what do we do at this point? We're so far behind, but he just kept a level head, saw the line to victory. This is our only option, we're doing it here and now on the BlizzCon stage.
And you can see it's right on the razor's edge as well. If you're looking at Oxygen, defensive cooldowns are already up. They just managed to get that kidney out. You can tell that go is not something that, it's not easy to pull something like that off and even see that opportunity. But then when we move forward into this series again, do you think that we're going to be seeing the same compositions?
I think it is really likely. I don't know if either of these teams really have a better option. Like we kind of talked about, this one composition that we are seeing them play, the Rogue Mage Paladin, it is scary because to fight against, because not only do you have the consistent pressure, lots of crowd control available to take down your opponent, you can also do these massive all-ins on the healers, particularly Restoration Druids, and that's what we saw in that game, and I expect that that's something we're going to have to see this Druid really look out for.
Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit more about Shadow, though, because throughout the year, we've been talking about who's actually going to be playing Pally, right? We've put a lot of pressure on different players like Rubcub throughout the year, but now when we look at different regions, we expect to be looking maybe at it a little bit more today. So Zico, for anybody who's not as familiar with what that does bring to the table, what can we expect to see?
Well, the Holy Paladin is kind of like Benruki mentioned. You get more damage because of, the Holy Paladin's Avenging Crusader, all the Holy Shocks, the Judgments. It really adds up in the long run. And then, of course, compared to a Druid, you have a little bit more reliable CC because you get that Hammer of Justice. You can run in and set that up with your Mage. Whereas with the Druid, you have the Bash, but it's, every 1 minute. Whereas the Hammer of Justice is a little bit faster cooldown on that. So the Holy Paladin also brings you a lot of aggression with the, we saw at the kill here, the Blessing of Protection. You can remove stuns on your Rogue with that. Blessing of Freedom, things like that can really just enable your melee to do a little bit more damage.
So now, we talk about all the good stuff. We got to talk about the bad stuff as well. Sid, where does it tend to fall behind?
I mean, at that point, it's just whether or not Oxygen can afford to play Relentless as a Restoration Druid. Maybe he needs to go back to the Gladiator's Medallion and hold on to that, because if they make CMD the target, it seemed like they were pretty comfortable with the Mage being the main focus point. So focus more of their talent structure and their strategies around protecting Oxygen on the Druid, sacrifice some of the durability from the Mage because CMD looked so solid that they may not need that little bit of an extra edge for him, and then try and beef up Oxygen on the Druid so that swap doesn't ultimately net him the kill, because if they don't get that all in, they were winning on every single margin pretty much.
Yeah, but if you're not doing that with the swap, does that seem like a reliable kill target, Venricky? If they weren't going for that Mage race throughout the entirety of the game and then see, okay, now we're going to go on to Oxygen, if they use that as their line of play, do you think that they're able to win this?
Well, I think if Oxygen does decide to play Relentless, it makes it really, or decides to play Gladiator's Medallion, it makes it really difficult for him to make the decision. Do you trinket Aiden's blind? That's really going to be the main thing. If you trinket the blind, then all of a sudden there's no point of even being Gladiator's Medallion, because those swaps are going to be even more devastating. So I don't mind the consistency of that choice. It's a really difficult spot to be in as a Restoration Druid.
How do you think that the rest of this matchup is actually going to go, Zico? Because this is, for even people who've been watching throughout the entirety of the season, this really isn't a matchup that we see all of that often. We're going to see a lot of players playing things that we've seen people who are mains on these specs switch throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is I'm expecting both teams to lock in the same comps, and they will be. Not a big surprise there. It looked like the Warrior Mage, basically, if they can drag the game on a little bit, they have the edge, because the Paladin's going to run out of cooldowns, and the Druid is going to have more mana, they're going to have more crowd control, more pressure as well with the Warriors. So I like that if they can keep it a Mage race. But if Unitas Blue decides, if they lose a game and they decide to go to a small map, it's a lot easier to take Oxygen down as well, because the distance that Shadow has to travel to reach Oxygen is so small, so he can just